if anyone's joining or watching this from the start, this will be kind of fully set up project. So I gotta mute that. I have Fab already downloaded, European Beach, some tree assets downloaded, and some other ones kind of already brought in, HDR as well, and I've fully set up the project. So in the plugins, if I go over to water, I have water enabled. Then if I go over to HDRI, I have HDR enabled. And then render, I have movie render queue enabled as well. So I kind of set up the entire project. So now I can just get working. So the first thing I'm going to do is do control space, go over to the content browser and create our level. So right click and then go over to level. And then I'm just going to name this beach scene and open it up. So off the bat, it's just gonna be pitch black because we have nothing in here. The first thing we can do is actually bring in our HDRI. So I think lights has it. Yeah, if you go lights, you can drag and drop it into your scene. And now you have an HDRI added. The next thing we can do to kind of get a baseline of where a landscape is just go over to landscape mode on the top left and then click create. So now we have a landscape. Then if I go back to selection, the reason I want to do that is now I can see that we're kind of off on where to start. So I'm just going to drag this over and bring it down and then go inside. And then you can click on your HDRI and then I'm just going to make the size 4,000 to start and adjust as needed. So that's looking good. The next thing is I already have an HDRI added in. So I'm just going to go over to the cube map and click right here to switch it out to a much better sky. Alrighty. Now we can start bringing in our ocean. So I actually don't know why this is looking the way it is. Maybe I can change this. And it's small, but it's always gonna be black on the bottom. Okay, so that's what's going on. So now I can bring in our water. So to do that, I'm going to go over here to the place actors panel, go over to all and type in water. And you can find the water body ocean right here. And you can just drag and drop it into your scene. Complete. And that will fill your entire scene up with water. And now we have our ocean. So if anyone's curious as to like how this came in, this is the waters plugin. So again, if you go over to window, edit plugins, and then type in water, this was added into your scene by enabling these 3 plugins right here. So if you don't have those enabled, you're never going to see water when you type in that into the place actors menu. And then the idea here is we want to create a beach. So I'm going to grab this and you can use this little white bar to adjust the ocean how you want to adjust it. So I'm just gonna kind of give me a good piece of land to play with while I create this. And then I can go over here and kind of bring you out, bring you across. To design our little coast that we are going to be using. The next thing I want to do is bring in a mannequin to kind of get a size reference on everything I'm going to be working on. So I'm going to do control space to bring up the content browser. And then if you go into the search bar, you can just type in MANN and find the mannequin. I'll do simple Quinn right here and drag and drop it. And as you can see, it definitely changes like your frame of reference of how large your scene is. Then bring her right here. Now, the next setup is bringing in a camera. So I have a frame of reference to work with as well. So we can go cinematic. So go over here to the box of the plus, cinematic, and then Cine Camera Actor. Click on that. And then if you right click on it, you can go over to pilot and pilot it and move it around like this. I think an angle like this works for me. And then you can click on your Cine Camera Actor, and over here on the right is your details panel, and you can adjust it any way you see fit. So I can go over here, click on film back, and I'm going to change this to DSLR. All that does is kind of switch to full frame, which is going to show like a true 35 focal length. And then from there, I'm going to adjust the focal length to 24 and 28. So we can get a nice like view of our scene. And line it up however you see fit. Aperture is fine. Everything else is good here. Now, once you kind of pilot your camera, you have these options up here. This is the eject button, which is going to bring you out of piloting. And this is kind of like the frame of reference that toggles exactly how the camera sees, or if you're in perspective mode. So you can click this on and off to kind of see. If this is blue, this is exactly what you're going to render. This top and bottom is not what's going to be rendered. So just keep that in mind. And then I'm going to now click the eject button so I don't move the camera when I move around my scene. And then if you want, you can click on your camera and pin your camera down here so you can always view it. Now, the next thing I want to do is kind of key in the light as much as I can before I jump into kind of designing everything else. So to do that, I'm going to go over here to the box with the plus and go over to volumes and type here post to get the post-process volume. And that will be added to our scene. Now, the post-process volume is honestly one of your handiest volumes because it is how you can make changes to your entire scene when it comes to lens flares, image effects, dirt masks, exposure, all of it. So for this, we want this in here for exposure to start. So I'm going to go over here to the search bar and type in bound, and infinite extent bound is what I'm going to click. This is really allowing me to make sure the volume is affecting our entire scene. If you don't do that and you have this unclicked, the only part that is going to be affected by your volume is what is inside this box. So by clicking it, it just makes it affect your entire world. And then click out of there. And now I'm going to back up and go to exposure, so EXP. And then the two I'm looking for are min and max EV100. So I'm going to click those on. And we just want them to be the same number. So I'm going to go 1 and 1. That's for sure too dark. And I somehow ran away from where I was looking. What happened there? Water body, post-process volume. There we go. I'm going to make it -1 and -1. That's a little better. Maybe -3 and -3. Too much. -2 and -2. The idea here is just to play around to lock in the exact exposure that you want for your scene. So with that, we have pretty much everything we need. I'm going to click on the HDRI and add in one more piece. So if you go over to Window and go down to Environment Light Mixer, this is how you would generally use an environment. So in our case, I'm using the HDRI for our environment, but you can use a directional light, sky atmosphere, volumetric cloud, and height fog. It's completely up to you. In my case, I want to use HDRI because it's just a little more realistic of a background, but I do want the height fog. So I'll do create height fog to get that in there. And then it usually causes this weird dark cast in the background. I've never really figured out how to fix it, but I do think if I bring the size down, no, that's too small. Let's do 300. No, let's do 3000. It tends to dim the darkness, so maybe even 2000. Again, one more 0. There we go. That dark line in the background kind of disappears. If anyone knows how to fix it, though, let me know. But I can change the fall off. Oh, there you go. Fall off is actually helping. Fog density, reducing the fog is also helping. And then Volumetric fog, turn on that as well, which is very handy. And then the last bit to kind of get this to work the way we want is to go over here, click on the box with the plus, go down to lights and click on directional light. And the directional light is going to come in very strong. The main thing here is to line it up with this over here. So the directional light kind of lines up well with our scene. That way the light is in the same direction as the light is being cast by the HDRI. And then we can just decrease this probably down to 5, 2. And I'll leave that there for now. Now the next bit is kind of creating our landscape. So we have a material to use for the sand. So to create our landscape material, I'm going to do Control Space, go over to the content browser. So get out of this, exit out. And I already have 2 made right here, but I will remake them so we can kind of go over it real quick. So the first one is just right click and go to material, name this M for material, and I'm going to go landscape blend. And then just type that in correctly. And we have landscape blend. And then you can open it up. Now I'm going to make this quite large, and then I'm going to click on this and go over to use material attributes. So this just comes down to one single pin. And then the next thing here is right clicking and doing a landscape layer blend, and then a make, if it shows up, there we go, right click, make material attributes. So the make material attributes is where you're going to plug in all your textures that you get from Fab. And then from there, it is going to go into your landscape layer blend. And your landscape layer blend is basically cataloging each of your textures. So your landscape can then use it. And this will all make sense towards the end, but that is kind of the flow of how this is going to go. So I'm going to scroll out and do Control Space and bring in the Fab textures that I downloaded. So if you go over to Mega Scans and then go over to Surfaces, I have a few that were downloaded correctly, not all of them, but right here. And then I can grab and drop all of these in. And then I'll go back to Surfaces again, Bright Desert, see if this one's correct. Some of them didn't download with height maps, so I kind of aren't using all the ones I downloaded. Let's try Rippled. Is course correct? I think course is the incorrect one. Yeah, I just got a texture. Okay, so I'll just start with these 2 for now, but I will set them up 3 times and then I can just transfer it later. So let me spread these out and then explain what they all do. So this one is our albedo, which is our base color. This is the normal, which is going to really help with shadows and really make it look realistic more than any of these others. This is our height map, which is what our displacement is going to use. And this is called an ORM. O standing for ambient occlusion, R standing for roughness, and M standing for metallic. So literally maybe at the start of this year, I think it was pre-Fab, so when Quixel Bridge was around, you used to get an ORD, not an ORM. So this is an ORM. You can see the donation right here, or denotation. I'm not sure if I'm using that word correct. But you can see the name right here, which is ORM. If you downloaded any textures prior to it moving to Fab, you would have gotten ORD. I'm not really sure the reasoning for switching it to an ORM, but basically the blue value is metallic. So these are lined up in the same order as RGB. So O being R, R being G, and B being M. O being ambient occlusion, which means that is this right here. R being roughness, which is this right here. And lastly, M being metallic, which is this right here. And if you actually click on this texture, you can click out and see the different ones. So it's a texture pack, so they're layered in by the R, G, and B. So if I click out of the R and click into the G, There's a new matte right here. If I click out of this and click on the B, you're going to get a blank because for the most part, none of these textures come with a metallic matte, which is really why I'm confused as to why they decided to kind of split it this way. Before it was an ORD, and what you'd use for displacement would be this blue channel right here because it'd be an ORD, D standing for displacement. Now they just have a height map in here, right here. So if you go over to Fab when you're downloading, let me click out of this. When you go over to Fab when you're downloading assets, if I go click on Quixel and then go over to materials and just click on any of these materials really. If I click on this one, you'll see right here that it has an AO, a base color, a bump, cavity, a displacement, which is what you're looking for, gloss, normal, roughness, specular. The weird thing now about Fab, though, is it doesn't always download a displacement. Sometimes you need to download either high quality or raw. I've noticed high quality is my best chance. Sometimes some of these materials will say they download with a height map, and then I never get a height map, which is a little frustrating. But I guess you just got to live with it until they fix it. But if you were doing any landscapes and are used to using like this yellow one for the displacement, just know that now Fab will download an actual height map that you're supposed to use. So kind of going back over to our landscape, you have, again, our albedo, the normal. This is your ORM, and this is your height map, which is going to be used for displacement. So this make materials has the exact same pin lineup that our material attributes does. So if I unclick it and kind of move it over, you'll see they're nearly identical: base color, metallic, specular, roughness, and so on, all the way down. And then you have like displacement right here. The only reason it's grayed out is I haven't activated it yet, which we'll do later. But I just kind of wanted to show you that so you knew what this is doing. This is really just gathering all the different items that you would normally be putting into this landscape. But since we want to do multiple different ones, that we're going to need multiple ones that we then blend together using this node and bring into our landscape material. So for this right here, we have our albedo. I'm going to drag our RGB, which is our base full color. So if I click on this, you can double click, unclicking, they're all packed together to make one single color, which is why you want the full RGB matte right there, unlike using, say, this one where we're going to use the red, green, and blue. For the normal, same thing, RGB into our normal. And then for our ORM, the only two we're going to use is the ambient occlusion and the roughness. So the R goes in ambient occlusion and G goes into roughness. And then finally, our displacement will go into here, height map into displacement. And then we're going to follow that exact same thing for this one right here. So just dragging everything around. Normal, ambient occlusion, roughness, and displacement. And then I'm just going to copy this one more time, just so, just so I have it for when I bring in a new texture, because I do plan on using 3 different ones for the final. And then now we can click on our layer. And for the layer, what we want to do is go over here to layers and click on this little plus sign 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. And the idea behind this is each layer is going to have its own name right here. So now we can go to these little arrows and drag it down. And once you drag it down, I'm going to go over here to layer name. And I'm just going to name this top layer. Not caps. This middle one can be middle layer. And this bottom one can be bottom layer. And for now, I'm just going to keep them as weight blend. However, I do want to note that if you want to use displacement, what you want to do is height blend. But I'm going to set this up first, and then I'll go over that next. So now that that is done, we can drag each of these into here. to get our layer information, and then U into here. And the only last thing you want to add to this is a landscape coordinate. So right now, just to kind of go over it fully, I'm going to click apply and save. We can exit out. If I have some layer information saved. So if you're not sure what that means, just ignore this right now while I delete it. So delete. So if I click on this landscape and I go over to the content, I'm going to go to blend and go right click on my landscape I just created and go over to create material instance and then out click. I'm going to click on the instance, click on the landscape, and then scroll down, find where it says landscape material under the details panel and click this little arrow right here to add it. And don't freak out, everything's going to turn black. Now that that happened, I'm going to go over here to selection mode and go over to landscape. And in landscape, I'm going to go over to paint. Now, before you'd already have some layer information added in. Not totally sure why they changed it, but the button you want to click to add in your layer information is this little button right here, which says create layers from assigned materials. Click on that and your top layer, middle layer, and bottom layer will all populate in. And now what you want to do is click on layer info, and we're just going to do weight blended layer for each. And I created a folder already called landscape layers. Well, I'm going to save each piece. So just click through and save each. Now, the next thing I noticed that kind of changed, let me bring this down. Weight blur, save. Next thing I noticed that changed is in the past one, it would have already populated with the layer information and wouldn't be black anymore. For some reason, now it's black and you actually have to paint it on to fix. I don't know if this is just a glitch with me or with everyone, but that is the case for at least every time I've used 5.6. So it's working correctly, but you actually have to paint everything on, and it's just going to say a blank canvas. Whereas if you're using Unreal Engine 5.5, it would have just populated everything. So just to make life easy, I usually scroll all the way up, go to the brush size, and just make it the largest brush size you possibly can, and I just paint everything. That way, it just populates with the base or top layer, and then I can adjust it after that. But that is now how we set up our landscape. So I'm going to go over to selection mode and kind of zoom in with the landscape. And the first thing you're going to notice is it's very faint since it doesn't have a lot of like color texture to it, but you can see a grid lines going through. And if I zoom in, you can notice that right here is like one full box of the full texture. And then right here is another full box. What's happening is it's just repeating tiles of the same texture. And you don't necessarily want that, and you can't adjust it with how we set up our material. You need to add one extra thing to the actual material. So if I do Control Space and I go over to Content, I go back to the material we just created, which is Landscape Blend, and open that up. The thing we want to add is called a landscape coordinate. So I'm going to right click and do landscape layer coord, and it's going to be this little box right here with the multiple colors. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is S-click, which is going to give us a parameter node. I'm going to name this top layer tiling. And then I'm going to M-click to get a multiply node. Now, if you're not sure what these nodes are, if you right click and type in PAR, it's a parameter node. Scalar parameter, I believe is the correct node. Yeah, scalar parameter. It is something you're going to use quite often. So knowing the hotkey, which is just S-click, makes life very easy. And then multiply node, same thing. If you just right click and type in here multiply node, it'll be right here, multiply. But again, use it quite often. So M-click is the trick to get a quick one there. So once you have those, I'm just going to plug and play each one in. And then I'm going to bring the multiply to every single UV channel. Excuse me. Okay, so now that it is in every single UV channel, the UV channels are really how you're going to be adjusting the sizing of the texture, which is why you want to plug in there. And then when it comes to the default value, make sure it's 1. If you have 0 left in there, it's basically going to just disappear and you're going to think you broke your landscape when you didn't. So now that that's done, I'm going to drag it, drag over it, click Control C to copy, and then paste one for each. To kind of move back a little, you could use the exact same one for every single texture if you wanted to, but by doing so, you won't be able to independently adjust the tiling on each one, which is why I preferred kind of doing one for each pack. That way, if I want one to be larger and one to be smaller, I can make those adjustments. But again, completely up to you. So I'm going to just scroll across and add all of these. And then the only other thing you want to do is make sure to change the name, because again, if you don't change the name, all the values are going to be attached. So Unreal is kind of smart in the sense that it knows that everything is named top layer. If you keep the names the same, they'll all be adjusted together. So you need to change it to middle and bottom layer. That way they won't all be on the same page. So again, plugging into the UVs. Nope. And then click on this and I'll name you bottom. Cool. Now that that is done, I can click apply and save and close. And now I can go over to our instance, and inside the instance, you're going to see this global, how should I do this? You'll see this global scalar parameter. If I click down, you'll see bottom layer, middle layer, and top layer. I believe right now top layer is what's on there. So if I go 0.5, you're going to see everything just got much larger. And then if I go 0.2, it got even larger. And that is how you adjust the actual size and tiling of your material. So now that that is done, the next thing I want to do is close U, go over to landscape. And inside the landscape, I'm going to click middle layer and I'm going to paint a little bit of the middle layer down. And we're going to go over 2 cool things there. So painting the middle layer, and in the act of painting the middle layer, you can see that there are 2 different textures that are kind of slowly mixing together. I can actually even go bring down the tool strength a little bit, bring up the fall off. That way we can kind of see it a bit better. But basically the textures are like slowly mixing and gently faded into each other at these moments. So this is how, or this is called weighted blend, which is not going to include displacement into our scene. So the next thing I want to do is actually enable displacement so we can start making more fine-tuned adjustments to our material, and it's going to make it look more realistic. So now I'm going to do Control Space to open up our landscape blend, make this large, and I'm going to go over here to our landscape layer blend and switch it from weight mode to height. And I'm going to do this for each one. And then now that height is activated, I can go over here to displacement. If you do, I think it's Command on my keyboard, Command to disconnect it. And then from here, you're just going to bring this directly into the height. So the pin that says height is going to get the height map now instead of our make material attributes. So bring that across, and then this one as well, and bring across. So now our height maps are going directly into the landscape layer blend. The next thing we want to do is click on the actual landscape itself and type in nanite, or NaN, to get our nanite section enabled. The first thing we want to do is enable tessellation. Yes. The next thing we want to do is decrease this magnitude. I'm actually going to keep it at 4 just so you can see the change immediately, but just know it's going to be way more than you're ever going to need. But now that that's done, I'm going to click apply and save, close, and then you have to click on your landscape to enable it on your landscape as well. So click on your landscape, go over to search and type in nanite and enable nanite. and then build data. And it's going to go crazy. So heads up. Oh, not crazy. Why is it not crazy? If it doesn't go crazy, that means something went wrong. And that's not what we like either. So I'm going to click out. I have a feeling if I did this in a different order, it would have worked. Go back into here. Everything's added in correctly. Yes, yes, and yes. Save. Displacement fade, we can do that. And then maybe let's just make it 10. But from every time I've ever used this, it always goes crazy. So let's see. No, that's not working. Rebuild data. Weird. I don't like that. The only other thing that I can think of that might be it is kind of redoing the layers. So let me see if that works. HRI, fab, landscape layers. Let's delete these. Everything's gonna go black again. Landscape. All right, let's bring on, then go over to landscape plus weight blend plus weight blend plus landscape layers. Boom. And then make it gigantic and paint. All right. Let's go back to selection. Click on it, rebuild. Weird. I hate when it does this. Let's see if this other one works. Oh, all right, let's go into the 2. Oh, I did displacement both ways. Maybe that's the problem. Let's see. Let's see if that fixes it. Apply, save, close. Yep, that fixed it. Okay, cool. So if you're ever doing this, what you want is to make sure, I guess, your displacement has to go into your make material attributes and it has to go into the height layer blend. If this is disconnected, it won't work. So make sure it's in both. Good to know. Didn't actually know that. And then save. And again, what I mentioned earlier for effect, this is a 10 displacement, which is way too much. So we can go in back into our material, open this, drag this out, type in NaN, and then I'm going to reduce the magnitude to 0.2, which should be a much better kind of look. Still too much, 0.01. Did you ever get missing tiles when enabling nanite in the landscape? Well, I had a bit of issue just now, but no, I don't see any missing tiles. Everything looks like it's present in the scene. That's past the edge of the map. But yeah, everything is in the scene. There shouldn't be any missing tiles. If you did have missing tiles, you might have the same issue I had where you have to paint everything on instead of just like leaving it black. So hopefully that helps. But now that that's done, I can go in selection mode to landscape and click on the middle layer. I'm going to bring this down and then paint this. And now you're going to see it's blending a little better in the sense that based on the height of the other texture, you can kind of tell how like the sand is mixing in based on the height. And if I even go in and increase the height a little, so make it 0.02, apply, you can see that it's kind of blending nicely. But we can improve this a little more. So I'm going to go Control Space, go back into our material, make some space, and I'm going to go type in what is called a 3-point levels. And this is going to kind of help me adjust the black, gray, and white points of the texture to help blend them a little better. So I'm going to try this middle one first. So I'm going to go into texture, and then the texture can go into the height. And then I'm going to do S-click, name this mid black. And then I'm going to do copy to get 3 more, plug them in. So this is the black. I'm going to change this one to be the gray, and this one is going to be the white. So let me rename mid gray and mid white. And then I'm going to do, I think 1.50, apply, save, close. And now you can make adjustments to this to kind of get it to blend a little better. So here is your mid gray and white, and I can change these values to get a different result on the blending. So as I'm adjusting this, you can see it's affecting how the material is blending with the next one. Kind of like this the most. So that is 0.25, 0.25, and 0.25, which kind of levels it out a little bit and helps the blend of the overall material on top of itself. And again, you can always adjust this whenever you want. I usually kind of level these a little bit in the beginning and then kind of play around and then make all the fine tuning towards the end once I know exactly how I want my scene to look. So now that we have our landscape and we have our ocean, the next thing we can do is start playing around with adding in static meshes. Actually, one thing I do want to note before that is I adjusted my ocean a little before the tutorial started, but I can make those changes now. If you click right here on the waves, so let me get out so you kind of see how I got here. If you go over to water body ocean, in the search, you can type in waves, which will show you this wave source completely unpinned. You can drag it down to the wave asset, and then you're going to get this right here. If you double click on this, you can make changes to the actual waves to look the way you want them to look. So this is a good way of adjusting the waves, because when you first bring this into your system, it's going to look very weird. So if you want, these are the parameters that I'm using, and you can copy those. But the next piece to this is I'm going to go over to material, and I also adjusted the water material as well. So if you go down here to absorption, this is where you can change the material. If I like increase it to red, it's going to change the color. So I adjusted it to look a lot more aqua. But the thing is, this is aqua and back here is blue, which you can't tell too much, but you can tell that there's a different color, and you want that to not be as obvious as it is. So what you can do is actually click on water zone. And in water zone, again, if you type in material, you'll get what looks like far distance. If you drag this down, you'll see far distance material, and you can open that up. And once you click on far distance material, me bring it over. Once you click on far distance material, and if you scroll all the way down, you can see absorption right here, and you can actually adjust the color material in the distance as well. So I'm just going to copy these same values. That way it gets the same color. So copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, and copy, paste. It's 8, didn't realize. Save, save, and then now when I scroll up, it's all one same color ocean. Now, my only issue with that is whenever you're looking at a scene and you want it to look realistic, the ocean never really looks like the same color. It kind of gets darker in the background. So I am going to go back over to Water Zone, click on the mesh, and maybe just increase the blue a tad or more than tad to see if it gets the result. Oh, I need to save it. That's the problem. There we go. I think that works. And then I can always adjust this later if I want. I want it to be close, but I do want it to be darker so it's not all the same color. There we go. And then if you ever want to double check, you can always just click on your camera, pilot, and then you can see the distance where it's just a little darker, which is what I'm hoping for. Now, ejecting, we can start adding in our static meshes. So whenever I'm creating a scene, what I like to do is kind of focus on the larger assets first, and then I can move down to smaller assets to kind of slowly design our scene. So larger assets seem like easier because usually it's, best to start with something large, easy to handle to get the lay of to get your full layout, and then you can kind of drill in. So with that, I'm going to do Control Space, go over to Fab, click on Mega Scans, and I'm going to go to some of the assets I've already downloaded. In this case, saving. In this case, once you kind of enter Megascans, you can go over here to your filters and click on static mesh. If you don't have these filters lined up, this is kind of like a quick menu of things you've clicked in the past, which is why I have them. If you have this blank and you're brand new and you don't have anything on in this area, to get the filters added in is right here. This little filter button, click right here, and you can find all your filters in here. So static mesh is right here. Once you click on that, it'll pop up in here, and then you can click it to filter. So click on Fab, Megascans, filter for static meshes, and I'm going to be looking for the larger meshes, which are these right here, to design our scene. So let me click back on the camera so I can see what's in scene, what's not, and start moving in our assets. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of copy and pasting, kind of adjusting, enlarging, and moving them around so it doesn't look like I'm using the exact same piece of rock again and again. And I can go out here into the distance, kind of drag you in. And then also the other piece here is if this is looking weird how it's lined up, you can always switch to world or to object. That way it changes the coordinates. So local coordinates will always line up with how it's supposed to look, which just helps when it comes to designing it. That looks good. And then one kind of far off in the distance. Okay, so the next thing we can do is start bringing in some foliage. So for that, I'm going to go over to selection mode and click on foliage. And then I'm going to do control space. And I already have a bunch of pre-selected items, but I'm just going to go through and select a few from each group and add it into our foliage menu. So again, just clicking and then shift clicking and then dragging and dropping. It might pause when you do this just because it's kind of loading the information you're giving it, but other than that, it should run pretty smooth. And let me do some rocks, pebbles, that kind of stuff. Is this tree debris? I think that works. And then I also have the European hornbeam that I added in. So I'm just gonna, or European beech. So I'm gonna grab some of these and drag these into my scene as well. These tend to take the longest to load. So if you click on them and everything kind of pauses and it's loading, don't freak out. It's completely normal. Once it's done loading though, it shouldn't do it again. And then grabbing some bushes from this as well. And then going up to DZ Trees, which is a free kind of download of kind of template trees. I'm just going to grab the coconut tree and the windmill palm. And now that I have all those in my scene, I'm going to start off with the largest ones first. So I'm going to click right here to the top and just unclick everything. I'm going to go over to the beech trees, click on those, turn them on, and just click paint to just see where we're at. So one, they are absolutely gigantic, which is not what we want. So we'll reduce the size there. And then two, multiple trees kind of popped up in one little area, which is also not what we want. So I'm going to do Control Z just to back it up. And then they're all still selected. So one way you can do it is go up to paint density right here and reduce the paint density, which is going to reduce the amount of trees that pop up. In my case, I'm going to do 0.05. Increase this a little bit to 100, just so I have a larger painting area. And then the other thing you can do is go over here to density, and you can also decrease density. In my case, I'm going to bring it down to 10, which is the same as paint density. It's the density of the amount of foliage that you're going to put in one area. So now when I click, it only populated 2, which is much better. I'll click out. Now the next thing is it's absolutely gigantic and we want to bring that down. So for that, I'm going to go over here to scale X, min and max, and I'm going to take the min to 0.4, or sorry, the max to 0.4 and the min to 0.2 and click. And that is looking much more where we want it. It is still kind of painting too many though. So just to decrease that to 5. And here I'm going to paint just kind of like this background area. Generally, I would say don't paint areas that are outside of your camera scene. I do want to play around with how I kind of move my camera at the end of this. So I am going to paint a little more than normal, just so I kind of already have that set up. But if you know the shot that you want, I wouldn't worry about anything that isn't shown on camera. Okay. Now that that is done, the next thing we can do is go over to our palm trees. So I'm going to click on the palm, go down to this palm, have them both selected. So control click on the other one. And then same thing, density. Let's bring it down to 10. I don't think the density is naturally as much on this. And then I'm going to go 0.75 and 0.5 just to start. Click. That's actually a good size, but it is still a little tall. So let's go 0.65 and 5. That's looking much better. And I'll just paint these away. And the idea here is don't worry about it being perfect. We can always delete and remove these later down the road. For now, it's just about kind of getting assets in there and playing around. But now that that is done, the next thing we can do is start adding in our shrubs. So to do that, I'm going to click on the palms to get rid of the palms and go over to the shrubs, click on those, and I'm just going to paint those to see where they kind of land. I like that thickness, but I do want them to be a little larger. So let's do 1.5 and see where that goes. Just kind of add some more in. I do think though it is a little too thick, so let's back up a bit. And I actually think let's go back to trees. So I'm going to click on the beach, and then have them all selected. I'm going to switch this to 0.65 and zero point 0.4, and then reduce this to 1. So there's not a lot, but there are more. Oh no, that's way too tall. Never mind. 0.5. Every once in a while, a giant one shows up. So let's actually go back. Let's do the opposite. Let's make them small. So we already have some tall ones in there that I think are the height that we're looking for. Let's go and actually do 0.4, 0.1, and 0.3. Just add some more shorter foliage in here. Some of these are doing the weird wind thing. This. Oh, this is the most annoying and ugly thing you could imagine. Okay. Now that that is in, I will go back to the bushes and add those in as well. And I'm going to do 2 different heights with this one. I'm going to do 20, so there's less of them. Then I'm going to click on them and go to 1.5, 1.4, 1.6 actually, and add more. That way it's looking a lot more jungly. Let's get some back here to kind of fill up this area. Perfect. Now I can unclick these and kind of go into the other bushes we have and add those in as well. I just kind of want to see how they look. Those are looking good though. We can reduce this down to 50 so we're not getting too much, and fine tune it a little. So let's make it 100 and find where our scene starts. Kind of just add this in around here. Again, so we just get a bunch of different foliage in here, so it looks a lot more jungly. Perfect. One side note is I absolutely love the wind effect that is on these trees. These look fantastic. Okay, cool. So now that that is done, we can start kind of growing out our scene a little more. So the next thing I want to do is go back over to content, click on fab, make a scans, 3D, so that we can go for static meshes. And then, nope, that's too tiny. Got some logs here. Increase the size a bit and have some driftwood looking things kind of fill up our scene. Like that. And then again, if it ever looks weird like this, you can always go up here to get the local kind of turn to it. I think that looks good. I'm going to make you much larger. Kind of bury you right here, which is looking pretty good. In the context of foliage, which scenario do you prefer using procedural content generation? Honestly, when you have a texture map that very clearly outlines where you want everything to be, um, a good example of this is like when you are working in Gaia and you're using like a tree map, it will kick out like a black and white map that shows you where trees should be and where trees shouldn't be. In those scenarios, I feel like PCG is super helpful because you can tell PCG to basically copy that map and populate. It's something I kind of taught in my PCG tutorial. I would say that is my preferred way of using it. Generally speaking, I kind of like having full control. So using PCG isn't something I normally jump to use, but I mean, it's kind of awesome. And the more you do use it, I feel like the more exciting it gets. So most of it is probably that I don't use it enough. But I would say whenever I have like a landscape or any map that kind of very clearly lays out where things are supposed to be, PCG is awesome because you just tell it, all right, this area is for trees, this area is for plants, and it'll populate it, and your scene is done within like 5 minutes. So under those scenarios or that context is where I think foliage is the most fun when it comes to PCG. Um, Okay, so now that we have some really cool logs in there, I think we can start kind of growing out our scene to encompass them. So let me go back to foliage, and now we can start using some smaller items. So I'm going to unclick this and kind of go to the grass and skip to the more smaller things. And I'm just going to paint this to start to kind of see how much and how thick. So that is cool and all, but I don't like that. So I'm going to now go over to density, up this to 500 and paint again. Still not the biggest fan. Also, it's quite large. Is this the ribbon grass? I don't think this is the correct grass. Yeah, this is the ribbon grass too. Okay, so that's good to use, but I want normal grass, which I should have. Click on mega scans. What's this? Wild grass right here. Perfect. I'll click on the wild grass and I'll bring it in as well. I'll click off the ribbon grass, have the wild grass selected, and then I'm just going to increase this to 500 and increase the grass itself to something very small. So it's just like sand grass. Let's see how that works. I'm going to go with maybe too small and not enough density. So let me click on you. Go down here and 2000. Oh, and it's very small. Got to fix that too. Let's do 0.75 and 0.5. Okay, cool. That's looking good. I might decrease the overall to 1000. And then let's erase and kind of add little pockets here and there. And then you can also go over here, change the brush to maybe just 10. So it's just painting wherever you kind of draw it. I want it to look more clumpish. There you go. That looks much better. And same thing here. Can't go too far. And then one thing I like to do on foliage, not sure this is the best way of doing it, but I kind of like adding like trails just because that's kind of how plants naturally grow across. So if I have like something on a log, I like seeing where you could kind of see where it came from. Cool. And then let's go back over to the camera and see how our scene's looking. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. There's definitely some empty space below, so I definitely want like some foliage that's closer to the ground. I also feel like this could be thicker. It feels empty in the background, which is not something you want. But generally speaking, I think it's in a good place. So now let me go back over to foliage and just keep playing around with adding new items. So I think we can add, the bushes themselves are pretty light. Let me see if there's a thicker bush we have. I haven't used any of the ferns. That's one. And maybe adding like one thick tree in here. This is what I meant when I said it loads if you haven't used the foliage yet. It'll take a while to load, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. Well, taking a bit. Um, what feature would you like Unreal Engine to have for environment creation? Um, that is a good question. I'm sure there's an opinion I have on this somewhere, but on the top of my mind, I don't. There's a few. Um, water could be helped, like in environment effects. Before they used to have, they used to have, where is it? They used to have like some presets, like Niagara presets, so you could do like dust, leaves, and like embers. They used to have like presets, but it was all based off of their old model. I think you can still get them. I don't know if they phased them out. Um, but it was based off their old way of handling effects. So Niagara is like their new way of handling it. And they never really came out with like cool effects you can use. I'm trying to see if I can get any of them open. Blowing particles. There's one right there. But they used to have like some really cool effects in like Unreal Engine 4 based off their old kind of setup. And now I feel like they don't really have any really cool effects. They just have like the baseline stuff that you can then, it's not that great and you can adjust it. Honestly, their old effects were kind of cooler in a lot of ways. So I would say environment creation, it'd be cool if you can do some effects because at the end of the day, like if I could add sand or I could add like a really cool haze that looks realistic, it stands out a lot. Um, And then beyond that, landscapes I feel are a little limited when it comes to like vertex painting versus like using a landscape, which I also kind of get annoyed by every once in a while. I'm sure there's more opinions I have on this, but off the top of my head, those are two that I think would be, if they implemented, would help people who kind of just started to make some really cool things. Um, okay, so now I have the big tree finally loaded in. I can go over to here, kind of update this, and I'm just gonna add, okay, the tree's also, it's not that tall, but it is tall enough. So let me go down to 0.5, and I'm just gonna add it to the background to kind of fill up the scene. So I'm gonna go back to selection mode to click on the camera, because for some reason you can't click on the camera in foliage mode. And then now that I'm back in foliage mode, I'm just gonna add this in to kind of fill these spaces so it feels a lot more jungly back here. Where's this? There we go. There we go. And then don't feel the need to fill too many in. Okay, so now when I go back over to landscape and, or back over to selection and click on and pilot, there's a lot less holes and it just looks a lot fuller by just adding, 12 more static meshes of just a bigger bush that kind of fills all these holes. So now it looks like there's an actual jungle back there, which I really like. The next thing is we can go back over to foliage mode. I'm going to eject, pin, go to foliage. And I want to add some more plants in the front of the beach, which is going to be the ferns. So I'm going to unclick this, go over to, what is this one? Is this actual fern? I think it is. I'm just going to paint these in. Oh, that's one giant palm. That's not what we want. Where's the palm? Click all these. Which one of these is a palm? You look like the palm. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, cool. Go back, just have these selected. Again, I'm going to increase density to maybe 200. And then these can actually be larger because I want them to be a little more prominent in our scene. And I'll make it 50. And I'll just play around with adding these in. The way they're sized right now kind of makes them look a little more like weeds, and I want them to be, again, larger. So I'm going to click on them, and let's do 1.5 to 2. Let's see what that happens. Yeah, that looks a little better. Yeah, I like that. And then I'll just paint it on, and I can go through and delete to make it look a little more natural. The other thing to this is I don't like these just like standing out. So I want to cover just like the empty like stems just sticking out of the ground. It just doesn't look realistic to me. So just covering this up and adding some foliage where I can. And then now that these are added in, I can go through and kind of delete and add wherever I feel needed. So right up front, it's kind of two on each other. I can delete that. This looks a little too far into the beach. So let me just add kind of around here. I think that looks a little more natural. We can do this. And then also having these in here, I noticed we can do a lot more grass if we want. This is a little too thick, in my opinion. That looks good. That's peeking through. These three are kind of, this is a weird little section in the map. One thing to note is you can't actually delete if it's not selected. So in the case of me not liking these four, I can't delete them since it's not selected. In this case, I usually would just select all of them so I don't have to like worry about which ones I'm selecting. That way I can kind of delete, and then I can go through, unclick them, and then just re-click the ones I was using. Okay. All right, cool. And then I feel like all that's unnecessary. Oh, I don't have grass selected, so it's not deleting. Now that I've kind of added in the ferns, I would say I can do a lot more grass and a lot smaller grass. So I'm going to go in. I want to find, there's one grass set that's like quite large, but we can go in, go over to maybe 0.4, and let's see how 0.4 is. Let's do 0.3. I think 0.3 looks good. I'm going to add in more grass. It is smaller and kind of fits a little better with a lot of this. And then again, just having fun with it at first, and then I can delete more once we kind of get further in. Let me 10. So I can kind of fill all these little holes in. I think that looks good. And same thing here. Cool. And then I can go back here and then again delete if I feel any of it doesn't work. Not the biggest fan of them all on the rocks. Like if it landed on like a crease like right here, other than the fact that it's peaking. Do I not have that one selected? Is it this one? Weird. Well, let me delete you. Interesting. Oh, you're under the level. Cool. All right. And then I can go through and just delete any of the ones that I feel are unnecessary. I guess none of these even make it into our scene. A few on the rocks work. I just think a ton on the rocks is a little weird. I'd rather it be on the grass. See smaller here. I think all that looks good. Back on piloting. Nice. All right. And this is what we're working with now. So for the most part, I really like where this is at. There are a few things, namely the color. So the foliage doesn't really line up color wise, and it's kind of nice when they all have the same brightness. So as you can tell, the brightness of the ferns up front is just a little too bright compared to this. And I really like this green that we have going on all right here. The palm trees really fit the beach. So I'll adjust the brightness to kind of fix that. So to do that, if I actually go over to Fab, I can go to static mesh and find any of the static meshes in question. I know these are them as well because I see them right here. You can double click on them, drag over here, and then you can switch your viewport They moved the viewport. Okay, it's over here to unlit. And in unlit, it's really easy to kind of see the color and the brightness of everything in your scene. So now that we have this, I can go over to our actual one, click on the base color, and I can adjust it any way I feel. So I can go down to opacity, normal, roughness, specular, and I can also go into base color controls. And for brightness, I'm just going to decrease the brightness until I feel like it connects a little better with the scene. And if you switch over to lit, you can then kind of see that difference. You can also change the color too, if that just generally helps, or the saturation level, which also helps kind of make it blend a little better. So I can save that, and then I can go over to the ferns and do the same thing. So I'm going to click out, click on the ferns. I can click on any of the ferns because Quixel kind of sets them up to have the exact same material. And double click right here, switch over to unlit. You can clearly tell the difference in color and the brightness. I'm going to bring the brightness down, and then I can bring the saturation down as well. And I can even adjust color, just play around with it really. It's going to be darker. That looks pretty good. Okay, save. And then go to lit. And now it fits much better in our scene than the bright, like a neon green that we had earlier. So that's a nice and easy way of kind of keying things in. The last thing I noticed that I didn't really put in our scene is rocks. So I can go back into the foliage mode now, unclick kind of everything, rocks and branches. I want to add both. So unclick everything, click on here, which is going to be our rocks and branches, and I can just add them in. In our case, the rocks are coming out slightly large, and I want them to be very tiny. So actually, let me unclick these two. Let's click on the rocks themselves. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's make it 0.5, and I think 0.5 will do. It doesn't want to because I reduced the paint density so damn low. There we go. And still quite large, so we can go back. I actually don't know if I like this rock. Yeah, those rocks look better. And then I'm going to make it 0.2. And just add rocks. Everybody loves rocks. Just looks much more natural. And I also just broke my rule, which is don't move the camera. I just did that. So let me eject out of the camera and I can move around again. It also is nice because it just provides texture to the overall scene. And we don't want rocks collecting unless they should collect. Make it areas right here. Cool. So those are rocks. And then now we can just add in nice little twigs every once in a while. I'll keep like one other rock. Oh, they're all done. Okay, cool. Oh, large twigs, large twigs. All right, in that case, let's bring you all the way down and just kind of add you wherever you lie. Oh, we really don't like. Nice. Look at all those. Okay, let me go down. All right, I actually don't need that many. Come on. 100 and 0.1. I guess I'll just paint a bunch and then delete. I think that looks good though. Maybe it's a little weird having the exact same twig like 9 times. When I downloaded these, I thought they were tinier. How about this one? Is this one a twig? I feel like you're so tiny you don't even show up. You are exactly that. You're very tiny and you don't show up. Okay, cool. I don't know if they provide much value since I don't see it, but I'll just paint them in. Okay. So selection, camera, pilot. And now this is our scene. So there are a bunch of small changes that I can make to kind of finish this off and make it look really clean, but I will save those for the main tutorial that I'll be posting hopefully in a week from now that kind of goes over all of this more in depth and step by step. But in the meantime, I will just do one quick kind of ending piece to this, which is the camera and the sequencer. So I'm going to go over to content, right click, go to level sequencer, and I will name this LS for level sequencer, Ocean 1, since it's our first scene. I will open it up. And the first thing you want to do once you open it up is add in your camera, which is going to be right here. Now, I'm just going to do one quick scene, so nothing crazy here, but to start it off, we have our camera right here. We can click on transform to add our keyframe, which is going to lock our camera in. And we can go to the very end and kind of do like a little sweeping shot right here. Click on that, and if I back it up, we now have a scene. Let me go all the way back here. This is probably not where we want it, so I'm just going to bring it down like this. Click transform. There is our scene. And then if you ever just want to switch it, right now, if you notice, it's going to start slow, go fast, and then slow down towards the end. That is the keyframe that we chose. If you actually just highlight all of these, right click, you can switch it over to linear. And then if I click play, it is now moving at one steady rate. And then I actually do like the cubic, so I'm going to go back to cubic. And then it's obviously a little fast. I can drag this out to add more keyframes or more frames in general, double the time it takes. Click play. And there's a nice slow camera going through our scene. Okay, sweet. If you want to render, you would click on the movie render queue, go over to unsave config, add in anti-aliasing, add in .exr. Those are my two favorites. The other one I've been using a lot lately is game overrides. Game overrides pretty much just maxes out all your settings. So it's kind of like a one setting to set them all. All you need to do is add it to your scene and it will move everything to LOD 0, increase to cinematic quality, everything you really need. Anti-aliasing, I will dive deeper in this in the beginner tutorial. I will also do a separate tutorial that kind of goes over everything for rendering and how to render. But in the meantime, you can always just go over temporal, make this say 12, override. You can delete JPEG if you don't need it. If you like using JPEG, I personally do just because it's easy to work with and I don't color too much. You can keep it, but totally up to you. But at the end of that, you just click the output by clicking right here, choose the output resolution and click accept and then click render and you're good to go. So I hope you guys like this one. I will be doing a full tutorial on this again, posting it probably in a week, which is beginner friendly. I will start from the very beginning, teaching you controls of Unreal Engine, teaching you how to create the materials, why to create the materials, exactly what static meshes I brought into my scene. And then I'll also be kind of fixing this up using the total landscape to adjust and make it look a lot more cinematic. So if you're interested, check it out. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Sam, you pretty much asked most questions, so thank you so much, and I'll see you guys later.